Greetings, everyone. This is Peter Salemi reporting from BICOG Media Studios. And I just got this article from Breitbart News that someone sent me in my email. And it talks about how China's threatening the United States with an EMP attack in the South China Sea. Of course, this is from Breitbart News. And it says here that China's state media on Tuesday, rather unsubtly, decided this would be a good time to chat with a panel of experts about the possibility of using electromagnetic pulse weapon, EMP, against American ships that enter portions of the South China Sea illegally claimed by China. The timing suggests it was a bit of saber rattling by the Communist Party, nervous about its power and prestige after the Wuhan virus disaster, which we talked about yesterday. That their economy now is in trouble and companies are starting to realize that China is not where it's at anymore, and they're going to start to move their operations elsewhere, most likely Mexico. So China's getting desperate. Desperate times call for desperate measures. This is how China thinks. So it says, but some degree of escalation in the South China Sea has long been a concern for the U.S. Navy and ships from across the free world. Now, we have been watching what's been happening in the South China Sea for years now. It's been escalating, and now it's escalating even more, and especially now that China is becoming very, 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 very desperate. It says, to put it bluntly, an EMP strike on U.S. warships would involve detonating a small nuclear warhead above them. But China's state-run Global Times threw in some speculation about low-energy laser devices to keep their saber from rattling too loudly. To counter U.S. repeated trespasses in Chinese territorial waters, the Chinese military has the option of using new approaches, including the deployment of electromagnetic weapons. And it says here, this includes low-energy laser devices, and it could be viable as they can temporarily paralyze U.S. ships' weapon control systems without visible conflict, but can send a strong warning, according to Song. Electromagnetic weapons can emit magnetic waves that can potentially jam electronic devices of target vessels and will not cause casualties, military observers said. These EMP threats were prompted by the most recent series of U.S. freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, which essentially involves sailing through waters claimed by China to demonstrate that international freedom of navigation will be protected. The Global Times did not explicitly mention it, but the USS Theodore Roosevelt's visit to Vietnam was deeply troubling to Beijing. They said this is the third time in just a week U.S. warships are known to have trespassed into the South China Sea. And of course, this continues. And of course, China does not like it that the U.S. and NATO, it's not just the U.S., but NATO, we've seen German ships, we've seen Canadian ships, we've seen French ships going through the South China Sea, and they do not like it, the Chinese. And we've been saying for years now in biblical prophecy that NATO is going to break apart. There's a prophecy in Jeremiah, the 30th chapter, talking about the Great Tribulation, verse 5. It says, it's a time of trembling and not of fear. And then in verse 7, it says, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it, for it is even the time of Jacob's trouble. And of course, Jacob is the United States, the British Commonwealth of Nations. Then in verse 14, it says this, all your lovers, it should read allies, all your allies have forgotten you. They seek you not. This is the same language as Daniel, the 11th chapter, verse 45, where it talks about the king of the north, the one that heads up NATO, the president of the United States, says he shall come to his end and none shall help him. The language is the same. And then it says, for I have wounded you with the wound of an enemy, with the chastisement of a cruel one, for the multitude of your iniquity, because your sins were increased. And then verse 15, it says, why criest thou for thine affliction? So here is that deadly blow that's going to cause NATO to break apart. And already, we've shown you another broadcast. The French President Macron said that many NATO allies don't believe in the Article 5 of the Charter anymore, where it says if you attack one, you attack us all. And here we see that the allies of the United States have forgotten. They seek you not. They have forgotten you. They seek you not. The Article 5 of their Charter, they don't believe in it anymore. But notice this, why criest thou for thine affliction and this wound of an enemy? Where does that come from? Well, Numbers the 24th chapter, verse 24, we see this. It says, and the ship shall come from the coast of Kittim. If you read our booklet, China and Prophecy, Kittim is China, and shall afflict, there's that affliction, Asher, and who is modern day Asher in this end time? Germany and Austria. Shall afflict Asher and shall afflict Eber. Those are the Hebrew peoples. They have a common enemy. Obviously, they're an alliance. Obviously, this is NATO and the EU. Germany heads up the EU. The United States heads up NATO. It's the potter's clay phase, NATO and the EU. NATO is the military wing of this alliance. So obviously, this is NATO. And the ships of China in the South China Sea shall afflict them. It shall afflict Asher and it shall afflict Eber. This deadly blow from the ships that come from China they're gonna send a deadly blow, and NATO's going to break apart. And here we see saber rattling from China, and it's getting louder and louder till eventually that deadly blow, whatever that blow might be, a nuclear strike. Most likely it's going to be a nuclear strike. But a nuclear strike, whatever that blow might be, that blow is going to tear apart NATO, and NATO is going to be a thing of the past. Reporting here from the studios at BICOG Media, this is Peter Salemi.